Lovely. So today, dear people, welcome everybody. Today we will talk about Yosef ibn Abitur. Ibn Abitur is also a person with a history. He lived in the 10th century, so his life, I think, overlapped with Saadia Gaon. I think so, but we don't know exactly the dates that he was born and the dates that he passed away. That is, as I said before, very hard to know in this period of time. Only very, very rarely do we know the exact dates. But so we will. I will try to give you a bit of a historical picture. So if we go here, we spoke before about the conquests of Islam that started, of course, here in Saudi Arabia and then spread out really fast. It ate up basically the Persian Empire. It ate up a lot of the Byzantine Empire. Byzantine Empire had also control over large parts of North Africa. So here you will have this part. This is also now part of the Islamic Empire or Caliphate, I should say. And Spain and Portugal. This is this peninsula here, also called Iberia. Together, Spain and Portugal is, as you see, at this point around 750, pretty much eaten up. So if I don't want to use a term that is that would not be respectful. I don't want to be disrespectful, but just swallowed up by Islam. Now, this was the point that the Islamic world was united at its highest, so around 750. But now let's zoom in on Iberia, on Spain and Portugal first, before we continue. At that point, around that point, only the very little is left that is a Christian territory. Muslims had this, but maybe just overnight, very soon gave up. These are rugged mountains. They are fierce people here who defended themselves and were able to kick out the Muslims very fast. And here in the north, you have the Pyrenees Mountains. It's also a strong buffer. So this is the period that basically the height of territory-wise of Islam in Iberia. So, but if we now go a bit further to our time, let's say the middle of the 10th century, the 900s, you see that the Umayyad Empire has been replaced by another empire, another caliphate, the Abbasids. See the Abbasids here, and they had their capital in Baghdad. We spoke about Baghdad when we spoke about Saadia Gaon. This is the time of Saadia Gaon approximately, and here's Baghdad is right here, so very centrally located. What happened to the Umayyads? The Umayyads fled. And they had fled all the way to Spain. And so Spain, that was the remnant of the Umayyad Caliphate. The Umayyad was driven away, but with their court and their most important people, they fled to Spain and they defended Spain. So now you had the old Caliphate, basically, in Spain, which were the Umayyads, as you can see here on the bottom, here, Umayyad Emirate. Now it's not a Caliphate anymore. It's an Emirate. What is the difference? A caliphate is led by a caliph, a khalifa in Arabic, and the caliph has at least the pretension that he represents all the Muslims, that he has all the Muslims under his dominion. Of course, here the Umayyads don't have all the Muslims, but they felt they were big enough that they could claim that they should have the leadership of all the Muslims. And at this point, the Umayyads have only a little chunk. So at this point, they don't claim to be caliphs anymore, those rulers, although later they go back to that term, but we'll perhaps see that later. Okay, so this is the map now. If we zoom in on Spain now, you see that quite a bit in the north has been reconquered by Christians. Here's the Kingdom of Leon, which is a Christian kingdom. This is Christian territory, Muslim territory. So in 2 centuries, the Islamic presence on Iberia lasted quite a bit, but gradually, there's a bit back and forth. They would reconquer bits, but over in the long term, Islamic presence in Iberia is shrinking until at the end of the Middle Ages, 1492. It is over with, but that's a long time. That is like 700 years of Islamic presence in Iberia, in Spain and Portugal. Good. So this is what we're talking about. We are talking about this. We're going to Spain now, because what happened? The Umayyads, and I'm going back to the map here, that had been first ruling over this vast territory. In the beginning, were very harsh rulers. They did use and employ Christian and Jewish minorities, but they were quite harsh. They were very much focused on expanding the territory, and also what happened is they tried to suppress the Persian language here in Persia, make it all Arabic. That is the reason why Iraq, which is part of the Persian Empire, Iraq, people don't speak Persian anymore, because all the Persian speaking people, that was very harshly suppressed. But now when they are here, this is their holdout. It turns out that after, and you see that a lot in history, that a regime might start as a harsh regime, but sometimes over the centuries, when they calm down, when they don't smell the blood of victories anymore, and later generations become more moderate. So here they became moderate, and actually, I would almost say, to some extent, enlightened. They were very much more open-minded, and that's why we see here in Spain a flourishing of culture, and also of exchange of culture between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Not always, but at periods of time. It wasn't constant. Those were periods. Now, let's go here. I'm going to start asking, maybe David, you've signed in first, so you're on top of my list here. So I'm going to ask you to read. Would you mind reading this for us, loud and clear, David?
Muslim Spain had become a haven for Jews from other regions. Jews made up about 5% of the total population, about 1% in the countryside, and 10 to 20% in the cities. Muslim rulers often preferred to appoint Jewish administrators to important positions.
Yeah, so you wonder, why would they do that? Why don't they put their own people in the important positions? I mean, that's what Democrats and Republicans do when they get to power. They put their own friends in local positions. That's what most people do. But so why did these rulers in Spain often use Jewish people as ministers, administrators, etc.? So maybe you read this one. There's some 3 reasons here.
A Muslim in a key position could be a potential danger to the throne. He could try to kill the ruler and take his place.
And that, of course, happened all over history constantly. So, and he might have friends and represent a big group of people. So, yes. Second,
a Christian in a powerful position was unthinkable because he would try to help the competing Christian kingdoms in the north.
Yeah. So, there are Christians, and by the way, we'll see Christian community shrank radically, and the Christians in a Muslim world, in Muslim Spain, were not often very educated. But it has happened because people who were studious and who had a lot of potential preferred to go to the north where they could thrive, right? But they were perhaps intelligent Christians, but they could always be spies, for the north and give sensitive information. So a Muslim ruler would generally, with some exceptions, not put any Christian in a key position. Finally,
Jews were minorities everywhere. They could not aspire to take and hold power. nor did they have any reason to side with the Christian kingdoms.
So they're a minority. So if they kill the ruler, the Muslims would never allow them to stay in power. There would be people uprising and say this is impossible, and so no, that wouldn't work. Even if he converted to Islam, most likely very unlikely, because he doesn't have a big network of support in the majority population, right?
No.
And also, they were treated at this point. I mean, they were more invested at this point in the Islamic society, because that was later that changed for a period of time, but they were treated generally better than in the Christian North. Okay, so the society was very diverse. The Islamic society. So of course you had Arabs, those were the initial conquerors, but then you had a lot of Berbers from North Africa who had more recently converted to Islam, and sometimes were more radical than the Arabs. There was a group called Muladis, which are indigenous Spanish people who had converted to Islam. And around the year 1100, about 80% of the people were Muladis. That means that there had been Christians, but had converted to Islam. So over the years, most of the Christians, especially in the cities, had converted to Islam, because you get a tax break. It's not as there's more options to advance your career. There's many things that let's say societal and economic incentives. And later, after Christians reconverted it, a lot of the Muslims fast already went back to Christianity. Jews were not so prone to switching religions. I mean, sure, it happened here and there, but not as massively as with Christians who went back and forth. By the way, you see that in Malta, right? Malta was totally Muslim, and everybody speaks Arabic there. I mean, Maltese is an Arabic dialect, but after it was conquered, now everybody's very, very Catholic, but they still speak Arabic. So that's another example of something similar. And then people called Mozarabs, that's partially overlapping with Muladis, but Mozarabs would be Christians, but also ex-Christians who took on Arabic clothing, Arabic mannerisms, and Arabic culture. And Mozarab is also a term for Spanish, like a Spanish, Old Spanish that was very influenced with Arabic, and was also written with Arabic letters. Here below is an example of Mozarabic. This is actually Spanish, but written with Arabic letters. It's interesting that I can't say something, but it would be too technical. There's here and there a word, but I don't speak Spanish. If that would be interesting to actually read something, but let's not go there. Okay, and then there were quite whole groups of slaves there. It was slavery was very common, and most slaves were Slavic. Why do we call slaves? Because in the Middle Ages, most slaves were Slavic people. So basically, a slave means a Russian or a Pole or somebody from the Slavic nations. They were conquered and they served as slaves. And so people would say, "Oh, I have a Slav." Okay, that's Slav just meant a servant, indentured servant, or whatever it is. And that's why the word slave. Now, of course, you also have the word servant, but that's the same word. Servant, Serbian, Slavian, it's all the same word. So, so there were a lot of imported slaves from the Slavic regions, and Slavic regions were often not Christian at that point yet. They were still pagan, roaming. They weren't often. They had some cities, but they also were mostly roaming tribes, and so they were often used also as soldiers, for the emirate, for the rulers. And you know what happened after a while? Slaves get released. If you sometimes a master, so to say, a slave master, somebody who owns slaves, would have a good relationship, would feel close to a slave, and said, "Okay, when I die, you're off the hook," or something like that. Or even at his birthday, he could slave. And so these people look each other up, and so there were eventually later in history. There were territories that were ruled by Slavic people. They probably spoke Arabic at this point, or sometimes some local Christian languages, but you could see them because they were blonde, and they had a tradition that they were Slavic. In any case, it was a very, very mixed multitude, this society. Now, we're going to the height. The most interesting part is the height of what we call the golden age of Judaism. What does that mean? I once had a student who was a typical Ashkenazi. He was actually Chabad, grew up Chabad. And he said, why is this the golden age of Judaism? Talmud study was much more advanced in Germany later. Well, so he defined golden age, like the height of Jewish culture, as that has to be based on Talmud study. But that's a typical Ashkenazi mindset, because Talmud study was not always perceived as the height of Jewish culture. Well, and especially in these old traditional Sephardi communities, Talmud study was important, but they studied it. There was no codex yet. There were no manuals for Jewish law. You had to study the Talmud to figure out the sources, to figure out Jewish law, what you had to do. And that was basically why most people in the Sephardi world at that time, and I shouldn't say Sephardi yet, because now we often think of Judaism as divided in mostly two main groups: Ashkenazi, which is German, Eastern European Judaism, with its distinct culture, and Sephardi, which is the origins are in Spain. Most and sometimes Sephardi is also used for Eastern Babylonian, so to say, Jewish communities and their derivatives. But in this time, you don't have. I would say that in this time, the big rift. Before I give that away, we saw before that more in towards antiquity. There was another division of two main communities, which was, as we call, Palestinian and Babylonian Judaism. Those were two distinct groups. So here in this period of time, the biggest two groups, the biggest two cultural, currents in Judaism were Judaism under Islam and Judaism under Christianity. Those were the two cultural the two different Jewish cultures. And so we tend to equate Sephardi with the first group, with the Jews of under Arabic rule, and Ashkenazi with the Jews under Christian rule. But that's not entirely true. The Sephardi culture that we now know has some of its roots in this period and in this area. But mostly Sephardi Judaism comes from Spain, but later from Christian Spain. That's after Islam was eradicated from Iberia. So it's not the same. And now we talk about, and there are Sephardi Jews, or Sephardi means Spanish in a certain point in Spain, in Hebrew. But so you could say in the north of Spain, in this period that we're talking about, there were Jewish communities there. So technically they're Sephardic, but very soon they were under Christianity. So very different culture from the Jews in the south of Spain compared to the Jews in the north of Spain. I talk too much, but I hope it's still interesting. Now, I'm sure I could have said these things all much faster and shorter and more concise. And
You are
even
being
this.
concise
Shimon,
and
it
you are
is.
illuminating it for us.
Good.
And everything you say, Shimon, is a value. So don't double guess yourself. Thank you.
Okay, I won't dip myself, neither single nor double. Good. So we go here to the Caliphate of Cordoba. I write here. Maybe that's wrong. I should say the Emirate of Cordoba. Maybe I should explain this. At a certain point, the height of this culture was so big and grand that Abdurrahman III, which is one of the main rulers in the very, very height of this culture, said, you know what, we used to be the caliph and we are on the forefront of Arabic culture. I have been called the Emir of Cordoba. Cordoba was the capital from Christian era, 912 to 929. Of course, he wouldn't say that. He would probably use another Islamic year count. But I should not have been we should not have been demoted to Emir. The heck with it. He didn't say that, but I am the caliph still. And so from 929 to 961, he ruled under the title, the Caliph of Cordoba. Now you have two caliphs. It's very, very interesting. So in totally, he ruled from 912 to 961, which is an enormously long period of time for in this period of time. Usually people are killed or poisoned or, there were diseases that we had no antibiotics. So things could happen all the time. You could catch anything. Luckily, he had a very good doctor, and we're going to talk about his doctor very soon. So hold on. And then he had a son that came after him, Al-Hakam II. This is a statue of Al-Hakam, probably in Cordoba, I would assume, because that was the capital. He ruled from 961 to 976, which is like 15 years, which is a lot shorter. But he didn't live as long as he had hoped, and many people had hoped. Now, both of them, and especially Al-Hakam, were, as I said, would now count to, in some ways, as enlightened. There are some ways that they are not so enlightened, perhaps, and I hope we can show that too. Although we have to not drift too much away from poetry because it's about poetry. But I'm setting the stage here. Among other things, he built a university and a very important library. We're getting back closer to poetry because in libraries is where you find the poetry. So these buildings were, this was a library and a university. Can you imagine studying in a university like that, so gorgeous? That must have been quite special. Now, we're getting to his doctor. And now I'm asking Margot to read this slide.
Central figure during this period was Abd al-Rahman's Jewish private physician, Hasdai ibn Shaprut, 915 to 970, or a period of 55 years. A ruler's private physician was something akin to a health coach. He would check up on the ruler on a daily basis, on his family, his generals, his ministers, his harem, etc.
Yeah, every day he would check the doctor and say, "Doctor, you're a bit pale today. What's wrong? Is something bothering you?" So you understand that the doctor would be very close to the ruler. The ruler would say, "Yeah, I had a bad night. I had a fight with my wife, or I had a fight with my harem. They're all bonding against me." And so anything, I'm dealing with this and that problem, and the doctor, and what do you think? So, it's very easy if you're smart and if you're emotionally intelligent for a physician to have some influence, right? Maybe you read another one.
In addition, such a person was like a confidant and a therapist. Hasdai was a bright man, and Abd al-Rahman also started to ask him for advice on non-health related topics. Eventually, Hasdai's position evolved to the point that he acted as the vizier, the caliph's minister, but without the title.
Without the title, because that was going a bit too far, because there are rules that in Islamic law, it's called the Pact of Omar, or the Rules of Omar, that the minority, the Christians and the Jews, are free to some extent, within limitations, to practice their religion, but they cannot be in positions higher than Muslims. So they can never be placed over a Muslim. So you could say, oh, he's not placed over you. He's just my advisor. He's under me, but he's my advisor. But if you make him officially a minister, a vizier, then he has people under him. But he was doing exactly the same thing. It was actually the same thing. Just the Abdul Rahman just didn't feel comfortable, obviously, to officially give him this title. But he was very influential. Khazai took care of foreign affairs. He was like the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He negotiated with Christian kingdoms in the north, even with the Byzantine Empress in Constantinople. Maybe Eliezer wants to read the slide. We usually take turns. Is that okay, Rabbi Eliezer?
Yes, Hasdiah sent a letter to express Helena of Byzantium, in which he pleaded for religious freedom for the Byzantine Jews. He pointed to his own warm relations with the Caliph of Cordoba, illustrating respectful relations between the Muslim ruler and the Jews. He also described his own kind treatment of the Christian of Spain.
Yeah, he's saying to Helena, to the empress, look, he was concerned with the treatment of the Jews by the Byzantines. So he would actually say, "Dear Queen, we are treated here really well. I am treated really well. Look, my position here, the Caliph is really like a father to all his citizens, and Muslims and Jews and Christians alike. And I am empowered. And, we treat the Christians really well. I hope you can do the same." So it's almost like a hidden threat. Like, if you don't treat us well, we have the Christians under us. And, please, be smart. Maybe. But another interesting thing, I really always find this interesting. I mean, this is a big one, but I'll give you two more examples. There was a case of a queen of Navarro in the north. Shall I show you where Navarro is? Navarro is a kingdom here. So here you have the little map. So the Caliphate of Cordoba is one big block, but then the Christians in the north were divided. You had the Spanish Marsh. That's probably a conglomeration of little fiefdoms. Then you have Navarre, which is Navarro, Leon, and Galicia. But these people are all related to each other. Often, many of these people are related. So what happened here? Hold on. The Queen of Navarro came to Hasdai because her son, Garcia Sanchez, who was nicknamed Sancho, was the king of Leon, which is the neighboring kingdom, had been deposed by the noblemen because they thought he's not fit to sit on the throne. He was extremely obese. He said, how can a king like that, how can he lead us in the battlefield? He's just thinking of food and his pleasure, and he's no good. And she asked Abdurrahman, who was a doctor and a physician and a health coach and all these things, can you help Sancho back on the throne? So maybe with the help of Abdurrahman, not Abdurrahman was not the doctor. I'm saying Hasdai was the doctor, but all these things went through Abdurrahman. And can maybe Abdurrahman help him on the throne? By the way, the Queen of Navarro was related to Abdurrahman. I think his mother was a niece or something. So even the Christians and the Muslims were intermarried with each other. So Hasdai first say, okay, let him come here to Cordoba. So he came to Cordoba and he treated him against obesity. He put him on a strict diet, gave him exercise, bath and stuff. So he lost a lot of weight. So he's in better shape now. And then Hasdai said, okay, Abdurrahman will use even his army to get him back on the throne and teach them a lesson. But there's a condition here. If you want to, you have to pledge, you have to submit to him. You have to show that you see in him your superior. So she had to come and prostrate herself, bow down for him. And she did. She swallowed all her pride and she went in front of Abdurrahman's throne and bowed down for him and begged him to help his son. And he did. And then he won the throne back. I think there were some conditions that Sancho, or now King Garcia Sanchez, had to, I think, pay some tribute and stuff. As soon as he was on the throne, he abolished that. And then Abdurrahman had to come in and teach him a lesson with his army again and stuff like that. So it wasn't really a happy end in the beginning. Another example, very interesting. German Emperor Otto sent a letter to the Caliph, to Abdurrahman. And Hasdai read all these letters first. He wanted to be sure that there was nothing in there that was unknowingly insulting to Islam, but that would not help international relations. and he thought, no, you cannot send this letter like that. So he sent it back, and he wrote down suggestions. If I were you, write this. I would write this. I would write this. Then the ambassador revived the letter according to Hasdai's indications. And then I don't know what the request was about, but everything went smooth. And the ambassador wrote, "I've never seen a man of such keen intellect as the Jew Hasdoi." Now we know what Ashkenazi pronunciation comes from. Hasdai is now Hasdoi. That sounds very Ashki, right? But he was, German. So, okay. Hasdai ibn Shaprut. We're going to Kenny.
Hasdai ibn Shaprut was also in touch with the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad and with the Talmud academies there. He corresponded with people such as Dosa Gaon and the son of Sadai.
The son of Saadia Gaon's son. So we have a continuation of history. He spoke at length about Saadia Gaon. Now his son became the Gaon in his stead, and so they have correspondences. How do we know these? Most of them are from we mentioned it before, the Cairo Geniza. Yes, Ken, maybe read another few lines.
It's hard to overestimate Chadai's ben Shaprut historical contributions. Under his encouragement and patronage, the generation of Jewish scholars, Talmudists, grammarians, astronomers, physicians, philosophers, and poets flourished in Spain. The flourishing of Jewish culture that he shepherded was unmatched until the modern age.
Yeah, he spearheaded, but he supported it. Basically, was unmatched until the modern age. This was, in that way, truly can be called the golden age. It was a flourishing of many aspects, also of Talmud, but grammarians. It's up my alley. Now, what's happening now? We know that still the Gaons are in Baghdad, and that is the center of Jewish learning. I'm going to ask Abshalom to read two slides.
One day, a ship was captured off the coast of Italy by Spanish Muslim pirates. On board was Moses ben
Hanoch,
one of the most important scholars from Babylonia, on a fund-raising trip for the academies in Baghdad, accompanied by his wife and son.
Right. He was fundraising, and they were captured by pirates. So not of the Caribbean, but of the medieval, the Mediterranean. Yes, Abshalom.
Okay. The captain could not keep his hands raped her. She asked her husband if drowned people will be included in the resurrection of the dead. When Ben Hanuch answered that they would. She jumped overboard and drowned.
Yeah, very, very tragic, right? Very tragic. And so Ben Hanoch loses his wife. And what happens is Moses ben Hanoch and his son were taken to the slave market in Cordoba. And where they were they were put up for sale. And Jews were often on the slave markets seeing if there were other Jews there put up for sale as a slave, and they would try to raise the money, and that wasn't cheap. It's a big drain on the community. So, but they were able to buy them. They didn't know who they were. And so they were what's called redeemed by the Jewish community. So, and then they let them go. So Moses started going to, that was his thing, to the Talmud school there. And he started to pike in, and eventually they asked him to teach a class. They were all very impressed. They said, we have an amazing scholar in our midst, Moses ben Hanoch. Abigail, you haven't read yet. Maybe go ahead.
Hafsa ibn Shapru heard about this, and he appointed Moshe ben Hanoch as the head of the Jewish Academy in Cordoba. This was a game changer. It effectively moved Jewish leadership from Babylonia to Spain. Now Jews stopped sending their questions to the Gaonim in Baghdad and instead directed them to Cordoba.
Yeah, so that was very a big deal. This is one of the big, the most important and brilliant Talmud scholars is now in Baghdad, is heading the academy. And why would people in Spain and even in Italy and in Rome and North Africa, why would they send their letters all the way to Baghdad? It takes so long to get there. The letters get lost. Just send it to Cordoba. So Cordoba became like a center of Jewish learning, and of course, and even North Africa, Egypt. Of course, this was a victory for the still existing, in the still existing dichotomy or competition between Babylonian Judaism and Palestinian Judaism, because now everybody's following, of course, Babylonian scholarship. Because this was Moshe ben Hanoch, who came from Babylonia, and he brings Babylonian scholarship. He's not teaching the Palestinian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud. So more and more people, and I mean, this is also why Sephardi Judaism, because of course, Iberian, Andalusian, Andalus is the Arabic word for Iberia at this point. Andalusian Judaism is the precursor of Sephardi Judaism, directly or indirectly. And so this is why Sephardi Judaism is actually 100% based on Babylonian Talmud and Babylonian Judaism, and not hardly at all influenced by Palestinian Judaism, while Ashkenazi Judaism has more Palestinian, quote unquote, Jewish influences than the Sephardim. What else happened? Chazai also promoted Jewish studies in many ways. This is also the time when the study of Hebrew grammar becomes a serious science. Hebrew grammar started mostly with Karaites, but now also became a passion of rabbinites all over the world. This is inspired by Arab. The Arabs were studying grammar very deeply. The description of Hebrew grammar and its categorization, its terminology is largely based on Arabic grammar. Sometimes they use the Arabic word, sometimes they translate it to Hebrew, but the whole system is based on it. So here you have conjugations of the what's called the binyanim, which are buildings. So every Hebrew word has 3 consonants. Here is shamar, shin, mem, resh. And the kal means that it's just simple. 1 shin, 1 mem, 1 resh, nothing before and nothing after. No prefix, nothing before, no suffix, nothing after. But then you have another one, a nif'al, which is there's a nun in front of it. So we call it nif'al. Why don't we call it nishmar? We always name these forms by the roots Pe or Fe, Ayin, Lamet, Nif'al. Why? Because in Arabic it's called that way. They always use Fa'ala. Fa'ala in Arabic means to do. And so Nif'al would be an Arabic term. And PL means the doubling of the middle letter here, Shimir, like in Dibir, that is a doubling of the letter. So it's interesting. And in Arabic, that's called Fa'ala with a double Ayin. Now, it's very unfortunate. I mean, I understand that in Hebrew they use the same format, Pe, Ayin, Lamed, but it's not so conducive because in Hebrew you cannot double the Ayin. So you have the PL that's supposed to be, that is the exemplary form of a binyan, of a building block, using the building blocks of the letters, where the middle consonant is doubled, and you're using an example, Pe, Ayin, Lamed, where the Ayin cannot be doubled. So you're not seeing in the word PL a doubling of the consonants. So if it would have been Shimir, that would have made sense, but they use Arabic terminology that doesn't really work for Hebrew. So it's very interesting. But we're used to this. We now know when we study Hebrew, the PL means the middle one is doubled, unless there is an exception that some letters cannot be doubled. The ayin, the aleph, the het, and the hey. I think that's it. Yeah. So
is the shiwa is not the double word for it in Hebrew?
No, shiva is something else. Shiva is like a sukun or like the sound.
I mean shadda.
Oh, shadda, yeah, shadda. Correct. In Arabic, yeah, shadda. And I have I took a class once in Israel with my wife together, a month, the modern Hebrew, and the teacher found out I'm interested in grammar, but when she spoke about the doubling of the consonant, which in Hebrew is called the dagesh hazak, the strong dagesh, she called it a shadda. Yeah. She didn't know Arabic, but so even the word shadda is used by Hebrew grammarians. So a shadda in Arabic, of course, means strengthening, right? And hazak, the dagesh hazak, means the strong. In any case, this is it. Enough. I could fill a whole class on this, and I know some people are already fearing, oh no, he's stepping into grammar. Are we ever going to get to poetry? Because he goes nuts when he hears grammar. But I don't know if you were there, Abigail, but the very first year, I don't think the very first class I thought you were there, but the course, maybe you were. The course was Jews under Islamic culture in the Middle Ages. And I gave a whole class on this topic, and I had to explain it to people who knew neither Hebrew nor Arabic, and still worked out. So yeah, it can be done. But we're now sticking. Were you there?
Yeah, I think I remember that actually.
You can?
I think I remember that. I was there for that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Wow. We go back so long, ladies and gentlemen. Menachem ben Saruk. Who is this? Maybe you want to read another one, Abigail.
Menachem ben Saruk was a celebrated expert of the Hebrew language. He had started to work on a dictionary of the Hebrew language, but due to financial restraints, Menachem could not continue. Yosef ibn Abitur found the project so important that he took him in and supported him in all his expenses so he can continue his life's project.
Why am I talking about him? Because he comes up in one of the next classes. He's very important. So we are introduced to him. Yosef ibn Abitur was very important. And when he died, somebody wrote a eulogy, and we don't know who wrote this. But maybe Abigail wants to read this little poem. I don't have the Hebrew, unfortunately. I only have the translation, and that happens in this class. Unfortunately, I try as much as I can to also get the original Hebrew, but in this case, I have not managed to find it. But maybe you want to read the English, Abigail.
Sure. When Yosef ibn Abitur died in 790, a eulogy was written by an anonymous poet. The grinding yoke from Israel's neck he tore. Deep in his soul, his people's love he bore. The sword that thirsted for their blood he brake, and cold oppression melted for his sake. Because of Yosef, Israel's heart was moved in love towards God, with dread and fear removed. So
he was great. He really helped the Jewish community to thrive. So I just mentioned Moses ben Hanoch, who was the head of the Jewish Academy. Oh, now I use this one for Menachem ben Saruk. I cannot use the same image for two different people. That would be very confusing. All right. And it already is confusing. But I'll change this one, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Moses ben Hanoch, the head of the Jewish Academy. So from now on, this is him. One of his most brilliant students was Yosef ibn Abitur. We have our poet, who lived from 940 to 1025. Not a short life for these days. He became a religious authority for the Spanish community and beyond. Reportedly, he even wrote an Arabic translation of the Talmud. We would give a lot for that one, but it would have been very interesting. And it may have been based on a version of the Talmud that we don't even have anymore, because before it was standardized, there was a lot more. All right. However, Ibn Abitur was dogmatic, headstrong, and arrogant. For that reason, he was not emotionally very smart. Luckily, that was the only case in Jewish history that we had people like that. Yeah. For that reason, he was never appointed head of the Cordoba Talmud Academy. When Ibn Abitur complained about this to the caliph, he took it up on higher authority. The caliph answered, "If the Muslims were to reject me in the way the Jews have done to you, I would go into exile. Now go." So he had no chance. He's asking the caliph, "What shall I do?" And the caliph said, "Well, I think this is a good time to go into exile. Leave Spain, please, you pain in the asshole." And Abitur decided to move to Babylonia, where the big guys are. There, they will appreciate me. But after passing through North Africa and Palestine, he settled in Egypt, and he resumed his life there as a teacher and religious authority. He spent almost his entire life in Egypt, but later he moved to Damascus, and that is where he died.
Yosef ibn Abitur wrote more than 1,000 religious poems. Most of them have not been published. His style was traditional, similar to that of Yanai. Abitur's poetry is powerful and rich. It strictly follows the traditional conventions of Hebrew poetry, which were starting to change radically in his days, and with the introduction of a new style, as we will see in future classes. Some of his poems are still read annually in the Sephardi synagogues on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur. Man Nehedar Kohen Gadol, that B'Tzezo B'Shalom Min HaKodesh. That's also read in the Ashkenazic.
Oh, it is? Oh, great.
In fact, it's sung. How glorious was the high priest when he emerged in peace from the sanctuary.
Okay, so
after the
this
Avodah service.
You think this is the same one?
Absolutely, from the Avodah service, yes.
Well, I'd like to hear you sing it soon, but
As an amethyst set in a crown, as a carnelian decking a diadem, as a garnet that gleams in the ephod, as an onyx aglow on the breastplate, as a jasper glinting like stars, as a beryl on pillars of alabaster, as marble set in pure gold, as a chrysolite held in a signet ring, as an emerald flashing with brilliance, as coral of dazzling luster, as the moon which shines in its fullness, as a radiant dawn in its majesty, as the sun, as the stars of the firmament, as the Holy One, as an angel of the Lord. This is sung right in the Ashkenazic tradition.
Oh, yes, great.
After the Avodah service on Yom Kippur.
So you see here, the letters I made in green. It spells out, Ani, I am, Yosef, I am Joseph, Bar, the son of Yitzhak. I am Joseph, the son of Isaac. Okay, we'll continue. I don't know how far we get. Joel.
The following poem by Yosef ibn Abitur is intended as an introduction to the Kedusha, the third blessing of the prayer. In many Sephardic congregations, it is inserted during the repetition of the morning prayer on the Day of Atonement. As the angels in heaven above praise God with the words, holy, 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 likewise do the people below. The two choirs sing in unison, holy, 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 Lord of hosts, the earth is filled with his glory.
Yeah, so here we go to...
And I wanted to say about this text.
Sorry?
This was adopted by the Christians. It's part of their mass.
Yeah, but because it's from the Bible, so yeah.
I see.
Okay. Yeah, right. So This is the tune. Liyoshev tehilot l'rochev arabot kadosh baruch. Liyoshev tehilot l'rochev arabot kadosh ubaruch. What's interesting, he and this is 2 aleph, 2 bits, 2 gimels, 2 dalets, up to the yud. He says the angels, they declare him holy, his people below. So these are the angels and the people are praising him together. The people on earth declare God blessed. The angels declare him holy, and his people declare him holy and blessed. And it goes on like this. A bit longer. Unfortunately, we cannot do the whole poem because we are reaching our deadline. The last poem, there's 2 more poems. Now we can do 2 things. We can finish this next a little more in depth and continue next class, or we can just finish this and go to another topic. But maybe it's nice to look a little more carefully at this 3rd poem. And the 4th one is very beautiful too. And then we'll do that next week, and then we continue with our next topic. So we won't just, because we have time and people have other appointments, so they have to sign out perhaps. And shall we do that? Is that okay? Is that a good proposal? We'll just continue? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you
It's
for
nice
another
to see.
beautiful class, Shimon. Thank
What?
you. Thank you for another beautiful class.
Oh, I'm so happy you enjoyed it. And everybody, thank you so much for signing in. So we'll continue with the rest of Abitur, and then we will organically move. It's in the same period, and it's in the same country. We will move to more people on the scene during the life of Abitur that come on the scene, and that really become very interesting people. I want to thank everybody for signing in and for joining this class. I think